Opposition parties in the country on Thursday condemned Wednesday's raid on Nigeria Labour Congress National Headquarters in Abuja by security agents. Reports have it that the armed men, allegedly from DSS, invaded the NLC office and carted away several documents. According to the Congress, the raid took place around 8:30 p.m. with operatives reportedly breaking into the Labour House. NLC's head of media and public relations, Benson Oba, said the attackers ransacked the bookshop on the second floor, confiscating hundreds of books and other publications. The invading team claimed they were searching for seditious materials allegedly used during the End Bad Governance protest, Oba said. But the DSS spokesman, Peter Afunaya, denied the allegation. He said, "Please kindly note that this service, DSS, did not carry any operation at the NLC office in Abuja." Opposition parties in separate interviews condemned the action. The PDP Deputy National Publicity Secretary, Ibrahim Abdullahi, characterized the action as an attempt to suppress the labor union. "What happened yesterday is condemnable. As a party, we do not subscribe to that approach. Security agencies shouldn't be deployed to go into institutions of the state, like the Labour Office, to ransack them and then suspect or blackmail them into sponsoring what you call a protest. We see it as a further attempt to coerce the citizens and get them into silence. That is just the attempt or the decision of the APC," the PDP chieftain said. Also, human rights lawyer Femi Falana described the invasion as a shameful reminder of the dark days of military dictatorship in a statement he personally signed on Thursday. For genuine Democrats, it's utterly regrettable that official actions in a democratic dispensation could be reminiscent of atrocities that defined the dark days of military dictatorship. It is incontestable that it is illegal for security forces to invade the homes and offices of law-abiding citizens and corporate bodies under a democratic dispensation, Falana said. Also, the Civil Liberties Organization described the invasion as an egregious abuse of democratic principles in a statement by its executive director, Ibuchukwu Ezike. However, the ruling APC called for calm, saying it was too early to start trading blame over the alleged invasion. In an exclusive phone call, the National Publicity Director of the party, Bala Ibrahim, said it is something that can be multidirectional and one thing leads to another. Unless and until you're able to get information from those who are investigating as to what prompted their action, you cannot just preempt and jump into conclusion by saying a particular action is wrong. You don't know from the angle they are coming. It might be some information given to them, and in their course of investigation and in an attempt to leave no stone unturned, they will invade premises with a view to getting clues. One thing about crime is that no matter how smart you are, you always must leave something behind that will give clue to it. So that is the ugly side of crime. I think for now, it will be too early to jump to a conclusion and say action A or action B is wrong. It has to be after the investigators have been debriefed and got information with regard to what led to their action. Let's not begin to paint political pictures based on emotions and sentiments. We will be one-sided and wrong. Emmy, what is your take on this story?
Everything must not be centered around politics. Today we live in a dire situation where we need every vital information to ensure our safety, to ensure our inclusiveness, to also ensure the tranquility of the state. But if we continue to make hasty conclusions and ride on emotion, sometimes we are undoing ourselves that at the end we also regret our actions. I think first we must establish, does the security agencies in Nigeria has rights, to go for searching for materials that might be incriminating or that might aid investigation, or to ensure the safety of the society? The answer is yes, they do. But there are processes that are outlined by the law through which some of these actions can be carried out, because we are in a constitutional democracy. And in a constitutional democracy, actions and the processes are all stipulated and expected that every citizen conform their actions to the writings of the law. But if we do things outside of this, then it becomes undemocratic, and it also open room for several criticism that wouldn't have been there. So for me, I think the DSS or any security agency have that right to so do. But the question now is, what manner was the action carried out?
Right.
Was it in line with the law? Some of these things are overzealousness. You can actually do this thing without illegal invasion or suspicions that we are now seeing that are thriving around the society today. You can do this by simply obtaining a search warrant from a court of competent jurisdiction, and you simply go to that place and say you are here for a search, and you can do that without causing unnecessary uproar. But in a situation where we decide to conceive everything and to believe or to behave as if we are above the law, create room for criticism such as the one we are seeing today, I think the DSS and every other security agencies read your powers and follow them accordingly. You have the right to secure the society. You have right to curtail suspicious violence in the society. But how are you going about this? Are you making Nigerians to be frightened, or you are actually providing the necessary security and the peace that is required for a society to develop? These are the questions, and these are the rooms that are being created by the reason of this invasion today. So the DSS and every other security agency should be careful and subject their actions to the rule of the law. That is what is expected in a democratic state, particularly when it is a constitutional state. I think this is just my take.
Now, there are questions about the dictatorial approach of the government to issues, particularly when it comes to this protest. Now, let us look at the backdrop of what possibly could have led to this invasion. Now, NLC had a NEC meeting, National Executive Council meeting, that was on Wednesday, and a communique was issued at the end of that meeting. Now, there were some issues that NLC outlined. Clearly in the communique, NLC was in support of the protest. They said that Nigerians have a right to protest, and NLC also recalled that at some point that they had warned the president of his policies that were anti-people, and according to the communique, that the president resorted to insults and name-calling. I'm putting their exact words, that the president resorted to insults and name-calling instead of actually, looking into the issues, particularly when NLC went on some, I think, 2 or 3 days hunger strike against the policies of the federal government. That was one of the things they stated. They also condemned the human rights violations during the protests, particularly with respect to killing of protesters, mass arrest of protesters who were peaceful, attacking protesters who were unarmed and who were not violent in any way. They condemned that. They also said that flying a flag during the protest was not treasonable, and that if the government wanted to actually look at treasonable issues, they will look at bandits, more important issues that have been, facing Nigeria security-wise. They also talked about political interference with respect to the NLC Labour Party issue and the government using the Ministry of Labour to clamp down on NLC. So moving forward, they also told their members to, by every means, use every means within the law to ensure their safety during the time of the protest. So basically, NLC was backing the end governance protest by their communique, and also calling out the government on some things they felt the government isn't doing right. So now, this happened on Wednesday, and then on Thursday, this invasion happened. And according to the press release by NLC, late yesterday night, they said that invasion happened by 8:30 p.m. yesterday, that was Thursday, and that they mentioned the men of Nigerian police force. They said people who wore black vests and dressed like DSS and some other persons who were on Mufti, that they were the persons that invaded. And according to what they said, that they are looking for seditious materials, you know, in line with, to indict NLC of being complicit in this end governance in Nigeria protest. There are two dimensions to this. Could it be that the communique released by the NLC clearly supporting the protest and calling on the government to action, could it be, one, the invasion on NLC secretariat, could it be as a result of that communique? And secondly, the government tying the end bad governance in Nigeria protest to NLC. Could it be an indictment? What is going on? What could be the body language of the federal government? And finally, does that mean that the protest in itself is treasonable? Does that mean that the protest in itself is wrong if the government is trying to fish out organizers of this protest? Though there is an issue of regime change, but that is basically in the north. You agree with me? So, look, can you periscope on these issues? I want to get your reaction to these dimensions of the story.
The questions are much. So
Three questions.
So let's take the one after the other.
All right.
The issues of the Nigeria economic woes, which is also having a link to our socio-political woes, if you x-ray them critically, the question will be, who is actually innocent? Is it the NLC? Who will tell the people this is how we do it here? The NLC that shows most of the politicians on how to loot and how to change figures. So some of them are members of the civil service. But the question now is, are we actually innocent of the situation? That is on the one hand. Then on the issue of policies, I like being specific so that when I'm talking, I will know what I'm talking about. You said the policies that are anti-people. Which of the policies? You state the policies and you will tell us how is it anti-people for us to understand and look into the nitty-gritty of these policies and analyze them properly. But we say the policy that...
Now, the Nigerian Labour Congress talked about the removal of fuel subsidy,
that's good.
The floating of the dollar.
That's good. So the removal of the fuel subsidy, before now we have been crying that we're actually subsidizing this PMS product to other African nations. Sometimes we subsidize what we don't even consume. I will be crying that yes, this is a bad omen to our economic survival, and we can't continue in that trajectory. So we must find a way to curtail it. Yes, the policy to an extent wasn't perfect because before removing this subsidy, we ought to have our refineries, functioning, and other alternative created. But it was done hastily to the extent that it was declared that subsidy is gone without actually giving, little room for other economic indices to play out. And that actually created a lot of inflations in goods and services. But however, is that policy actually completely bad? Then you will look at how it has also helped to encourage the national revenue to the extent that we are talking about 9.1 trillion naira as aggregate revenue that has been generated based on the subsidy removal. Now the question now is, if the policy to an extent, the way we look at it from the perspective of the NLC, is that bad? What about the increase in revenue in aggregation that have helped the nation to reduce our debt services from 97% to 68%? Is that also a bad idea? Do we also say that based on the subsidy removal, that have also helped us to clear what they call foreign exchange obligations that was amounting to $5 billion, that was also a bonding on the Nigeria state that have been cleared? Is it also a bad policy to that extent? Is it also bad that actually the subsidy removal actually, create room for more money to be allocated to state and the other tiers of government, which the local government, to the extent that assuming this money were invested into critical infrastructure, won't we have some of these problems solved? So we will just say the anti-people policy without looking at the nitty-gritty and straying the policy critically sometimes will also create more problem in trying to solve a societal problem. So for me, the NLC, talking about protests as well, there's difference between protests and riots.
Okay.
When you are protesting, it is the right of every Nigerian to protest. But we must also bear in mind that where our right ends, the other citizens' rights begins. So in protesting, we must have this thing in mind, not to hinder or infringe on the rights of the other Nigerians.
Were there no,
but in a situation,
weren't there protesters who were attacked, unarmed peaceful protesters who were attacked? Did that not occur in this protest?
See, I'm not working with the security. I've had situations like that. I've heard about them, that they occurred, but I'm not actually seeing some of these videos without the one that are actually were engaged in rioting, in looting of property and destruction of access.
In the north.
In the north. We've seen this thing. Most of these ugly pictures are coming from the north and few from the south. So we NLC try to classify every action that took place within the period of that protest as protest. Sometimes we are not also doing the nation any good, because if people or citizens engaged in the destruction of public assets and also looting of private citizens' property, are we encouraging such action in a democratic state, or we're actually trying, to persuade our people not to engage in that?
The stand of NLC, regardless, the stand of NLC in this protest, does that warrant the government or the DSS and police, as it were, to take the actions they have taken to invade the office of the NLC and then try to say that they're saying that they are looking for materials to link NLC to end bad governance in Nigeria protest? Does that even make any sense?
I don't think the security people will say we are looking for material to, to indict NLC, but they will do that without even mentioning it. How? You see, I have said it before, that what the law permits you to do, you don't need to do it illegally or through illegal means. If you want to search for incriminating material or material that are assumed to be inciting, the courts are there. You can approach the court for a search warrant.
But in this instance,
and go to that building
warrant
and do those things in line with the law of the land. But your refusal to have, undertake that part is also what is actually creating some of this uproar now, and the condemnation that the security agencies are receiving right now. So for me, I have condemned that action. You don't need to invade the headquarters of NLC to search for material, where you can actually do it in line with the law. But on the other hand, do you have any incriminating materials with you? Do you, keep materials that you use in inciting citizens? These are the things that Nigerians ought to have endured a little and allow the investigations to be concluded. Then we now make our conclusions from there.
Is it going to be a government where opposition voices are stifled? Is it going to be a government or a system of government that claims to be democratic, but in its actions is very much undemocratic? How do you make it make sense? NLC is not a party of the government. NLC speaks for workers. NLC speaks for Nigerians. And if the government, in their stance, according to what most Nigerians are saying, that the government is not paying attention, whatever policies that the government is taking, yes, there are policies that have incubation stage, and it's going to take a while. And probably some of the policies by the federal government is at that stage right now. And that was why probably the president said we have to endure these baby pains right now. The question is, the man in the market, the man pushing wheelbarrow, the woman selling gari, the POS operator, even students and parents alike, What they understand by governance is when it trickles down to them. When they are able to afford things with the little money they have, when the money they have is able to have value. But right now, the purchasing power of Nigerians are being cut down day after day. What 30,000 naira can afford you last month or last 2 months, you will agree with me that 30,000 naira cannot afford the same thing this month. 3 square meal has become a luxury in Nigeria, and that's the sad reality. Now, whatever policies the government is embarking on, as beautiful as it is, has long-term effects. The question is, what is the short-term plan? Yes, the president has come out to say so and so amount of money has been released, but it's not trickling down to the people.
That's good.
So now, is it a question of the people not even knowing their rights and the right people to channel their grievances to? Or is it a question of the National Orientation Agency not even doing their job? Do they even exist at this point?
You see, Laurentia, there are things we need to put right here. First, NLC is an interest group. And by the action of NLC, one can actually conclude that NLC does not speak for Nigerians, but NLC speaks for the interests of its member and itself. Example, recently you just enumerated the economic situation in the country. NLC are so aware. They know that other Nigerians, access the same market that they who are working actually, also go there to purchase their needed materials. But NLC went to a negotiation table. Did they include the unemployed? Did they include the interests of those who are earning from the private sectors? Did they include the interests of the man in the village? But rather they went there to discuss their primary interest, which is the salary increment of workers, right? That is to say that the NLC are also selfish to an extent, thinking about themselves and not actually in the interest of the general Nigerians.
Right.
Then on the other hand, the economic downturn, I don't think is actually, limited to the Nigeria state. That is just the fact. I was speaking with one of my friends some of these days. He said one thing, that in Nigeria, a land that we are always complaining and complaining. I say, yes, we are complaining because the economic condition is so harsh that even buying pepper at the market become a very, a turbulent something. And he said, like, how much? I said, with 200 naira, you can afford a pepper. But usually with 100 naira, you can access this fresh pepper and all that. And he laughed. He said, do you know how much we buy pepper, even in Togo? Do you know how much they buy pepper around other African states? I said, how much is it? And he calculated it. The 200 francs CFA that we talked about is almost about 500 plus. 5 seed of fresh pepper. It's 500 plus. So that is what they pay. How much we buy palm oil here? Well, he said with 1,000 naira you can afford some palm. He said if you calculate it by the currency exchange in their own land, they buy palm oil for a rate of almost 3,000 or 3,000 plus.
What is the value of their money against our own?
A little higher. It's
it has more value, correct?
Yes,
then
yes,
it will reflect positively for them.
Wouldn't you agree? According to them, that a bag of rice that we are talking about 70,000 complete is 140,000.
We can't make that comparison because their money has more value than ours.
Based on the availability of this product that we are even enjoying here in Nigeria compared to what they are doing. This is not to justify that. The government of the
our
Nigeria
economy
state
and their economy,
well,
is it the same?
And our economy, according to the indices and everything we x-ray together, is even better than theirs.
Do they have the resources that Nigeria has?
This is where
now we are talking about oil. We have not even entered into solid minerals in the north.
See, this is where I am saying that my position now is not to justify that the managers of our economy from the federal down to the state have done well. These actions that we are suffering today has been something of ages.
Right.
We have been trying to manage them without actually tackling the situation, and now we'll be faced with the reality. This is where we are now.
Okay.
We have not been farming. We have not been doing so many things that we ought to have done as a state, as a local government, and as a country. And as a community, we've not been doing these things. And the reality is now confronting us that, yes, we have not been producing. So hunger is inevitable. But the way we talked about these things as if these things are limited to Nigeria, sometimes we just incite some of our minds against the country, which might not be to the good, be for the good of all Nigerians. Because if we live in a chaotic society, I don't think we will be able to go to the market to even sell and buy. Most of those who we need to go out on a daily basis to earn a living. So if a society is thrown into chaos and all that, we will suffer it. That is the other. And then let's come back to another aspect of the NLC argument that says, hey, as it were today, the federal government, I stress this in 3 times. You know why? Because according to our ground norm, there are 3 tiers of government. But as we speak today, if NLC speaks, NLC will tell you federal government. Are there no state civil servants? Are there no local government civil servants and the rest of it? They will tell you federal government. And currently, among all the palliative that have been, dish out, the trucks of grains and all this, I have been hearing, all come from the federal government, including the one that was celebrated in Rivers State here, where some of the illegal caretakers and all of them were saying we are not sharing palliative to our people to make them live well. It's also the palliative that came from the federal government. Then where is the one of the states? Where is the one of the local government? So if NLC, if we want to address our problems, we should address them holistically. We should not politicize them and try to make some people look as if they are angels, while some are the demons. Whereas it is a tripartite problem. This is my gross with the NLC. We can continue to incite the mind of the people against certain level of government and begin to applaud other level of government that are even impoverishing us the more. So for me, I don't think the protest is good and also bad, because it has turned to rioting. And NLC don't see this as a problem in Nigeria state, to the extent that they even position that hosting and waving of foreign flags in a sovereign state is not an issue. It's not a problem. Do you know that if you throw this nation into a situation of crisis where every man is allowed to do according to his wishes and needs, do you know even the NLC cannot gather? They can't gather. So we continue to wave flags. Some are waving Russia flag. Others will now wave Chinese flags. Others will wave Belgian flags. Some will wave the flags of England and the rest of it. Then what society are you building for yourself?
Right.